All right. So besides that new information that we just learned about hash, becomes really useful with what we're going to start dealing with today. So today we're going to focus on CSV. Who can tell me what CSV is? It's comma separated values. And why are we utilizing comma separated value? Like what are we using that for?
A lot of the time there'll be like big files filled with like information that they'll just like export it from something else. Just dumps it all into like CSV. You might want to import that.
Right. Great. So a CSV file, right, is allowing us to take a set of information formatted in a certain way, which in this case is separated by commas, okay? And then each row of comma separated value information is separated by a new line, right? So that we would see as like a set of information that we can export from something, import to somewhere else, right? And it really allows us to move data from a place to another, either if we needed to add more information to it, or remove stuff, or modify it, or analyze it, right? There are lots of different ways that this is being applied for people to have access to it. Give me my foot, okay? My foot got stuck on the chair, okay. So CSVs aren't necessarily a database, but it's definitely a beginning to being able to start from looking at data as just like a random string of information to getting more organized in being able to utilize that information or turning data into information, right? Data is just like a bunch of information data is just a bunch of values that we put into some kind of order, right? And then when we analyze or utilize that data into some meaning, we give it some meaning, then it turns into information, right? So a database is a space where we're just holding value sets and utilizing that so that we can gather information from it, right? But we have to start at the beginning of knowing how do we even hold this data, right? How do we organize it? How do we get it out, put it in, add to it, subtract from it, right? And at the time, or as we've been doing our work so far, we've only been like writing an instance of something at the bottom of a file, right? We haven't been really dealing with like, how do I actually put information into a file besides just typing it in, right? If you had to type in, for example, every single football team and all of their wins and losses and all of their information manually, it'd be a lot of time, right? But being able to build a program so that we're putting that, utilizing the skills that we've gathered so far with like dealing with arrays and algorithmic like gathering or analyzing that kind of stuff, we can utilize all that information to help us with the process of adding things in and taking things out of a file. And that's what you're going to learn how to do today. Okay, so we're going to start by, I just did an LS real quick just to see what was on my desktop. You can't really see it right now because I didn't mirror, but this is what's listed on my desktop. Okay, so I'm going to create a new file just for us to create some Ruby script onto. So I'm just going to make this my underscore CSV.rb. Okay. Okay. Oh, not Ruble, Subel. Okay, cool. So it's a blank file, right? But we're going to write some Ruby script that helps us create a text document or a CSV document. It's going to hold some information for us, right? So the first thing we do when we want to work with CSV, CSV is a module that exists in Ruby so that we can utilize it to particularly deal with CSV files. Okay, CSV files are things, as you mentioned. Yeah, it's kind of, if you go to Ruby docs, Ruby CSV. Okay, well, let's use this one. Okay, so it's a part of the standard library, but it is a larger class that lets us deal with, so I guess you could call it a class, but it's a larger class that we can use within the Ruby library to help us deal with CSV files. So they have their own sets of like smaller methods and classes that help us deal with CSV, either from a file, writing to a file, taking from a file, adding particular lines. Yeah, sorry about that. So yeah, and I guess in this instance, it's a class, okay? But we bring it in by requiring it, okay? So normally when we're dealing with stuff in Ruby, it's like so a part of the core. We don't have to specifically ask for it, but in this case, we have to require it. So at the top of the file that we have, we're going to require CSV. Let me do it, single CSV, okay? So then Ruby knows that I'm gonna work with CSV real quick, okay? And so typically right now we're working with hashes and arrays, right? So if we wanted to emulate what a CSV, what CSV documentation looks like, we're going to take a set of information. So right now we're just gonna make an array for different teams. Okay, so we have a whole teams array, and then inside that team array, we'll put two teams. So let's see, we'll start with an ID of 1, and then what team name should we put? Chiefs. Okay, and then wins, how many wins do you think they've had? 3, all right. And then losses? 0, all right. And then I'm gonna put my favorite team, because I can't see it right now. Broncos. Wait, what? Oh, I thought somebody was like hating and said Raiders. I was about to be so mad. Okay. Ah, I'm gonna put, what? Okay, I'm gonna put 2 and 1. That's how I feel. Okay, so so let's say we have these two teams, right? And this is their current makeup of how they've been doing, right? So what we can do if we want to work with the CSV class is we can see, okay, like what from here, I don't know how to read from a file to a file, so I'm just gonna look through the documentation. So I'm not really gonna read from a file, I'm gonna write to a file, right? So I can go down and see like, okay, so writing to a file, that looks like what we need to do. So I'm just gonna copy and paste the code, right? So here I have csv.open. So it says here we need to make a path to file.csv. So I'm gonna name it football teams. Okay, .csv. And then here we have this extra tag. Now, if we look over here, well, it might be easier in your documentation for your curriculum. So, curriculum. Let's read. Oh, so the 26th? It's 27th? Did I get it today? Yes, so awesome. Okay, so in your documentation for today's work, you have some of this information already, right? And further on in the documentation, you see that there are different modes when we're working with CSV that are going to do certain things. So we've already talked a little bit about reading and writing. So it's the same kind of concept. When we're reading and writing to a file, we need to tell it specifically hey, I want you to open this file, and your intention is to write to this file. So WB in this instance, which is what we're using, we're saying we're writing in binary file mode, okay? You don't have to worry about the like how that works with binary, but we're writing to the file. So that's where we're having WB as a tag. And then if we wanted to read from the file, right, which one would we use? We would use R, right? Okay, so now that we know that, we can go here. We know that this is valid. We want to write to the file, do. Okay, so now we have a do block. And I'll make this a tiny bit smaller so we can see the whole line. Okay, so for the CSV file that we've brought in, okay, so open, and then for the CSV file, we want to do something to this file. And here it's instructing us that we can set a row of data in here. So instead of me individually pushing data in here, I know I have already an array of arrays over here, right? So if I wanted to dynamically pull in this teams array and push it into this CSV file, what would be the method I would want to utilize? Like if I wanted to iterate over teams, how would I do that? Teams.each, right? Do. And then we can say team. Okay, so for each team, what are we doing? We're taking the file. So in this case, it's CSV. And we're pushing the team into the CSV file. Okay. So now I have planned out what I expect to happen, right? So if I want to see this happen, I'll go to here. So right now, again, I have review my CSV. Like, do you see anything here that determines the fact that I have? So right now, I don't have that file name in here, football teams, right? But if I run Ruby my CSV, okay, shows up. So it actually made that file onto my desktop, which I can actually see over here, but you can't see. But you can see it because I listed it from my desktop, right? Now, if I open football, actually, I'm going to do simple football teams.csv. All right, so we actually wrote that data to the CSV file, okay? It separated it by line for each record, and we have those two records that we wanted in there. Now, if you just opened up this information, would you have any idea what 0 is or the 2 on line 2 is, right? It's like, which 2, right? It's very, very complicated to understand what you're doing because, again, data is just data until you give it meaning. So it'd probably be useful for us to have a header, right? Most CSV files hold a header of information so we can kind of understand what we're doing. So where would we put our header? At the top, right? Would you agree? Okay, so then we ran this again. We probably want to have like team, oh, we need to make this strings, right? Team ID, that's the first item of information, right? What's the next one? Team name, okay, wins, losses. Makes sense? And then we need to make sure we have this comma here. Okay, so if I ran this file again, what do you think will happen? So you're saying it'll push it on top of other things, so then it'll, like, we'll end up with 5 lines?
I can't remember the definition of right.
Good question. I mean, good point, right? So here it's saying
Oh yeah, it kills it, and then it'll put it in.
So write only truncates existing file to 0 length. So that means it's going to just overwrite everything. Okay, so once we run this file again, it's going to overwrite everything that's been in this football teams as of now. Okay, so now if we go back to footballteams.csv, we see that even though it looks like, oh, it just pushed the thing up to the top, no, it actually wrote over the entire file, and here's the new data. Hi.
Hey.
Oh, Rod's here.
Yeah.
Okay, great. No worries. Okay, so now we've gotten 3 lines of information. The first line is our header, and the rest are the data, the rows of information, right? 2 records of information. And CSV helped us do that. Awesome. If we wanted to, so when we read this information, so let's say now that we have footballteams.csv in there, so let's say we did that, right? And now we want to read what's in the CSV file, okay?
Here, I'm sorry. Why are we doing this? What's the bigger?
The bigger picture is that when we get to a larger place in your understanding of code, a lot of the work that you're going to be doing is dealing with data sets. Okay, so everything we do, right? When the idea that we're building a car class and the idea that we're building an apple tree, right? That could be a program for an orchard. That could be a program for a car dealership. Okay, all the companies that you will end up working for or working with or creating, right? Those are all going to need to give meaning to information, be able to modify that information, analyze that information. So if you don't have the understanding for how to work with information from the base level of CSV all the way going further into dealing with SQL databases and going into larger frameworks of databases, it's going to, all these pieces are going to build upon each other, okay? So working with CSV is a baseline. And something that, what's it out here? One thing that you're going to note that CSV is just the most popular way to deal with data, besides JSON, which is pretty much doing a lot of the same work, okay? One reference that you might often see if you ever go to the Chicago Hack Night is Chicago's data portal. So Chicago and many other states have open data sets that you can mess with, okay? So if you've ever wanted to find a way to be I want to make a map of all the all the crime map, it's so, a huge thing, right? You would want to get that information from somewhere, right? And Chicago allows for it. Yeah, beach water quality. When should I go to the beach? How would I know that, right? How do I want to find out whether West Nile is happening in Chicago? Okay, so all these things are huge data sets. So let's see, they already have all the crimes, okay? And you wanted to plot that on a map. The first thing you would have to do is understand how to export that information and then manipulate that information from there, right? But step number 1 is exporting the information, right? Being able to actually get that data. And the way you do that is usually utilizing CSV. So if we went to any of these data information, so I want to see what are all the building permits that people are asking for, okay? If I ever wanted to look at this data, yeah, I can see it here. I can, copy and paste like I would, if I looked at it in Excel, building violations, right? So here's a whole data set of building violations. People are just not doing right with their buildings. Okay, so if I wanted to explore or download this data, if I wanted to download it, look at what's the first thing that comes into mind. CSV. It's still one of the most widely used formats for data. So I can do a lot with it after that. Okay, so if I ever wanted to look at this information, I can pull that information down, and I don't know what. Yeah. So let's look at it and just see like what are we actually getting before I download. I don't know how many records are in here. You download megabytes worth of information. Okay. So see here at the top, right? We have our headers, and then we have our one row of information, which starts with a record number. Okay. Is that all it has? Violation code, violation status, description, arrange, stop nuisance, move nuisance. Okay, so then here it says specific inspector comments, the violation ordinance, who was the person that did this inspection, what their status was, it failed. So this is like pretty complex one. One of the ones that John really likes looking at is, which is public information as well, is public government employee information. So you can look up like current employee names, salaries, position titles. So I can see like who's making all the bank in Chicago, right? How long have they been working? What are they actually doing? How do I make all the money? Okay, so like that's valid information. Maybe I want to analyze, you know, where is the, you know, city's budget going in, or, you know, how long does a typical employee last in this particular department, or, you know, which of all of these departments are utilizing the most money or have like X amount of employees, or all of those queries that we can make up in our minds. We would need to start by saying like, okay, what information is available? How can I pull that information out? And then how can I analyze this information utilizing the algorithms that we've learned so far, right? Like how do I calculate average, like the way that we dealt with yesterday with apple trees? Like I want to figure out the average diameter of the apple from all the apples that were pulled, right? And then from there, did y'all do that, by the way? Did you see that at the end in the runner file? Okay. I was like, am I making this up? So these kinds of graphs, right? Like I can't do this unless I know what data I'm working with and how to pull that information so that I can make this kind of graph, right? That's the code that you would end up building by first taking this information and knowing how to call it and that kind of stuff. So here, see, we have all these people, they're on salary, annual salary of 19, that says 19,000. Yeah. Oh, so that person, yeah, they probably have another job and that's like their salary part-time. But I know I've seen this go up to like hundreds of thousands of dollars. Right. You're like, who do I need to do things with? So yeah, and you can see like there's 32,000 records in this file, right? So if I pulled all this information, that's quite a bit of information. So I'm gonna pull. What happened?
Yeah, that's the thing everybody wants to know. Can we sort from top to bottom?
Right, and this sorting thing, right, it's easy for us to do visually, right? But there's code that's doing that. Sorting this, the sorting algorithm for moving all these records from top to bottom, right? Oh, so some people don't have an annual salary. Haha! So that's something you would end up dealing with, right, in your code. Yeah, so these are all hourly employees. So we'd have to... All right, we'll do this for one more minute.
I think he's getting $2.65 an hour. Some of them are like $50.
All right. Ooh, scrolled up too high. Okay, so let's see. So let's say we wanted to. Oh, it doesn't let us filter.
Salary. There you go.
There's some.
Who's that?
So we can do that. 115,000. Department of IT.
Serious. Oh.
Yep. They're making it happen.
2 jobs.
It's a full-time job. Chief database analyst, the person that's in charge of all this data stuff, right? So anyway, that's a data set that we can play with, right? There are a lot of cities that have this. Yeah, so there at any point now you'll be able to like pull that information out, right? Okay, so let's finish figuring out how to do this, right? Because now that sounds really interesting. I want to take all the employees, right? But how do I do that, right? Besides just clicking download or playing with it online, I want to play with it on my computer, right? And make a thing so that I can like notify all those people that donate money to me or like give me a job. I don't know, whatever I want to do. Okay, so if I wanted to read that information, okay, so right now we just have this small set of information, but if I want to read it, I can go to the documents here and say like, okay, I want to read from a file. Okay, so I can either read it a line at a time or I can read it all at once. So let's say for this instance, I want to read it all at once. Okay, so I can utilize this. Let's name it. So it's going to be an array of arrays, right? Yeah, I can do that as well, right? So let's say this bar. This read. So we're reading the file that we had already previously created. Okay. So there, footballteams.csv. Okay. Now in here, let's do binding.pry. Okay, so let's do this just so that we can see what we get when we run it. Okay. So thinking about it. All right, so now we've gotten to CSV or to pry running on line 18, our binding.pry. So from here we can ask, okay, what did we get? Array. So there's our array of arrays, right? So, and then we know that if we have an array, we can deal with stuff like, okay, I want to get first, that's going to give me the headers, right? I can deal with what's last, have my Broncos. Okay, if I wanted to get, if I wanted to save the Broncos, for example. Okay, so that underscore just means it's like the last thing that was evaluated. So that's the Broncos one. So if I wanted to say Broncos, what the Broncos, how many wins they had? Does anybody remember? It's the, which, 2? Okay, but if we get to a larger set of information, like, for example, if we did have, in IRB and in pry, you can utilize underscore as like the last evaluated value. So that's what that's doing. I named a variable named Broncos and I saved it. Yeah, I just saved it so that I can use that information. Right. So if I wanted to for what was it called? Yeah, Chicago Data Portal salaries. Yeah, let's get into it, right? Find. Okay, so now I just want to deal with this information. So let's just download it as a CSV file. Boom. Yeah, now we really want to find some information out, right? Now we're about to go from dealing with 3 records to 32,000 records. Whoa, whoa, right? Okay, so okay, so let's exit this. We're like going to the big leagues now. Okay, so we have our, what did I name it as? Not my CSV. What did it download to? Oh, it probably download to my downloads folder. Let me move it over real quick. I'm gonna rename it to salaries. I'm gonna throw it on my desktop. Boom. Okay, so now I have it on my desktop. Let's see. There it is. Okay, so if we go back into our my CSV, okay, we still have the way to read the information. Okay, so instead of this, we're going to do salaries. Okay, cool. Now let's run this file. Run this. And pry should bring us back to. All right. So we have this, well, it's still called array. Okay. Now, if I do this a little bit, so it's like a bunch of information, right?
What did you call it? This? What did you say? Sorry.
So now, right now, we're looking at in pry I named it FB array. So let's change that because that's not relevant, right? Let's name it all salaries. Okay, and then we can run it again. Okay. All right, we're back at pry. Okay, so we can ask all salaries. Okay, let's look. What are some methods that we can utilize to kind of like help us peruse an array of arrays? Like we already know we could do first. That gives us, right now, that gives us the headers, right? If we deal with last, that's giving us that guy, Zismowski, he's the last person. Ziskowski, right?
I think he's the one that moved the most too. You do like all salaries select on the annual.
Okay, so we can get a little more complicated.
Annual versus hourly.
Select, is it parentheses or it's going to be a block? Okay, and this is going to be like a record. Where record, how do we know what number is the salary? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
Actually, you can just go past salary.
Or are you saying?
I was going to say get rid of the hourly.
Oh, we're only selecting the record where, so then what is that? 0, 1, 2, 3, 4? Where record 4 equals salary? Is that what you're saying, to just get all the salary to folks? Sort. Hey, what do we get? Oh, because right now it's sorting on the record, like maybe the order in which it was given to us. So that might be why we have Aaron, and then Karina, Aaron, and then Abad, right? So these are all people that are salary, okay? But we wanted to deal with, and it was a little difficult, right, for us trying to figure out, like, okay, is it number 0? Is it like the 4th element in the array? So it'd be much easier if we can just say like record.salary, you know, that kind of stuff, right? So in the similar way that we talked about dealing with arrays of arrays, and that getting kind of annoying because we have to memorize the order, right? And we can't really name anything. We also have no idea if we're just like, if I run to the middle of this array, like I don't know, besides the fact that most people after salary have nil, what's that last nil? Like, do you all remember what the last nil is? Does anybody remember? So like right now, for me, just looking at this data, I have no idea what that last nil means. Unless I went back and looked at the headers, right? We might not have the ability to do that. Damn, ambulance commander. Okay, so it's really difficult for us to be able to get that kind of information. Okay, so what would be the step if I wanted to deal with this information? Like, it's really difficult to peruse this information just as it is with array versus array of arrays, right? In the same way we had that difficulty with our cars, okay? We might have a hash solution in our CSV that we can work with, right? So if we look back in here, we can see that we have the capability of working with, I don't know where it is. Let me see. Headers. So there's something called, like, there's a tag you can give your method when you want to read a file. So we can set headers. Yeah, these are all the default options. So notice these default options are in caps. It's like they're constant, right? So these are the options you can utilize when you're reading a CSV file to help you do more things in a better way. Oh, see, there's that call separator, row separator. So the best thing right now is utilizing headers, right? So we can say in here, headers, true. Okay, so now we said we're going to have headers. The headers should be, we do have a set of headers. Okay, so when we run this file again, we'll see that our information is going to be delivered to us a little bit differently. Ran through 32,000 files, lines of information. Okay, so now if I ask for all salaries dot last. Last for CSV. Oh. Okay, so now we're getting a CSV table. If I say first, okay, first works. Can y'all still see this information? A little bit. Yeah, I was like trying to figure out. So if you notice here, we're getting a CSV row object now. We're not getting an array. Now we're getting a CSV row object. Okay. The usefulness of that now is like, I know what I'm working with. So when we were talking about what the last thing was, why there was this nil and nil. So now we can see very clearly that nil value is based on an hourly rate. Now, because this person is salary, the hourly rate is nil, right? So I can ask for here, annual salary. So now I can just ask to get this information back. I don't remember what order it was in. Now I can just say like, hey, I want this person's annual salary, right? I don't have to memorize the order. And then from here, I can probably do collect or select on these objects, and then be able to do that the process of getting the salary in a much clearer way than saying like, oh, I need to get record each record's like 6th item, and then make sure that I can do things with that.
You now to say just sort by annual salary, and then it just lists everything out.
Sort. The sort, let's see. Sort, I would do, oh. Okay.
And A, B, whatever. Because now it's looking, so it'd be like annual salary 1, annual salary 2, annual salary 3. And you have to use the spatial.
What do you call that? Spatial thing?
It means it's like, yeah, compare whether or not one is bigger than the other. Close the thing.
So also that's sort. So
This is going to return us an item, right?
I don't even know annual salary.
Yes.
So what does that mean?
They're not stored as
So the CSV row is giving us a hash, right? The key is name, and then the value is Aaron Jeffrey. Okay. So I know if I wanted to call something in this row by its key, I can ask for it by name. Okay. And same thing here. Annual salary is the key, and the value is this string object. I don't know. The CSV row object, we might need to work on like what specific things we can call on it. But in itself, we have an array of row objects, right? Instead of an array of arrays, we have an array of a CSV row object. Some things of which we can, and it typically works like a hash. So many of the things we would do typically with a hash, we can do on a row object. But you can look specifically in the documentation for what you can do with a, oh, not that way, this way. You can see what things you can do with a row object by looking specifically in CSV row. So it explains here, it's part array and it's part hash, retains an order for the fields and allows duplicates, but allows you to access fields by name. Okay. So then it gives you information about like what you can do with that. You can still do things like push things into a row that you wouldn't normally be able to do when you, like, you don't really use push for a hash object, right? You usually use that with array, okay? So there's other methods you can, these are the methods you can utilize on a row, okay? So if we ask for the headers, here, we wanted to say all salaries dot headers, it'll give us an array of those headers. So returning to us, these are the headers that I have on record, okay? So there's lots of things you can do in here, some of which might be like inspect, key, like, so there might be some enumerating things we can do here, okay? But all that's in the documentation for CSV, okay? So the rest of the work that you're gonna do today, you have one challenge today that's focused on CSV. I would say that between now and like 11:45 or 12 or something, spend some time doing exactly what I just did. You can definitely use the documentation for the data portal, or you can write to a regular CSV file, make a CSV file on your own. So start by doing the work we did here. I would make an array of arrays, push it into a CSV file, right? And then try and add something to this file. So first it overwrites it, right? we can additionally look at this documentation and see that we can append something to the file. So I know that if I wanted to add somebody else's favorite team to our football team file, I can do that, right? So I would try doing that.
And why you need to use them?
The binary file mode, I can't really explain why specifically you need to use the B for binary file mode. I know that it does, there's some like differentiation, but you can test that if you want. Just do W first, and then do W plus on your file, and then do WB on your file, and see what the differences are when you see the result of your file.
You select the file.
Yeah, I'll select this this file. So we have both open. Do we have the read one? Yeah, and then read. Read a CSV. Okay, and then this one is write a CSV. Okay. So I would first comment out this one, do this one, modify this team thing. So I'll just say make a teams array. What happens when you want to add to an existing file? Right to a brand new file. What happens when you want to add to an existing file? So, and then you might, so you would, yeah, I would test that out, play with it, because there might be some work you would need to do in here to change writing to the file. Okay, because what would happen if I wanted to put a new team in my file, but that's the code that's written in there. Well, no, if I put A here, for example, it'll append it to the end. So let's say I wanted to add 4, 3, or 4. Okay, so if I ran this right now, what do you think would happen? If I run Ruby, my CSV. Okay, it ran Ruby CSV. So if I look back at my football teams, it made it 3 times. Why did it make it 3 times? Because here I'm iterating over the teams array, which is up here, right? And I'm saying for each team, write this line of code into my into my CSV file. Okay? So I need this not to happen inside this each loop, right? I wouldn't need this each loop. Okay? So I'll make a copy of this. Right? A set of records to CSV. Right?
So if you did
versus
want to have that basically the only difference would be replacing the A with a WB to tack that on to the end of
right? Is that right?
Yeah, so this part is, because of this tag, it's going to write in a binary mode, and it's going to overwrite the entire file, right? A means append. So it's going to append to this file this record. So it's going to keep whatever's there, and it's going to append it to, when it gets to the end of that file, it's going to append that data to the bottom. So it would be like adding to the file as opposed to overwriting the file fully. Very important distinction when you get to, like, somebody accidentally overwrote the entire salaries array. Now nobody has any money, right? Chicago is going to go into like some kind of ridiculous war over like nobody's getting paid, right? So that's the importance of understanding what particular way you're dealing with your data. Okay, so these are the three things that I want you to like practice doing on your own. Make your own records just for like a little short amount of time, and then in the afternoon you have two things that you're going to do today. One is called word guess, and I think it deals with CSV file, and then ice cream and freezers. That's a larger object-oriented, like model out what it means to have a, like if I had an ice cream shop, right? I have a bunch of freezers and I have ice cream that I want to make. How do I model all those things to work together? Okay. Sweet. All right, I'm going to end this.